Good afternoon, students. Once again, I have come to talk about one more romantic poet that is a part of your syllabus. Um, After Keats and Shelley, I think logically it would be best that we take up Lord Byron, who is one of the most flamboyant romantic poets that we've had, belonging to the romantic period. He was also one of the poets of the younger generations. He was the sixth Baron Byron and was simply known as Lord Byron. He was born on 22nd January 1788, and he died on 19th April 1824. So I am just giving you a rough sketch of his life and times. This is just a short background lecture, so as to introduce you to the poet. He was a British poet, he was a peer, and he was a politician who became a revolutionary in the Greek War for independence. And just like Keats and Shelley, he too is considered to be one of the leading figures of the Romantic movement. And till date, he remains widely read and is rather, you can say, rather influential. And some of his best works include the lengthy narrative poem Don Juan and Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. Now, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage is a long poem, and the poem that you have in your syllabus is a part of this particular poem. And many of his shorter lyrics in Hebrew melodies also became quite popular. And like Keats and Wordsworth, he too traveled very extensively across Europe. I think that was the fashion of the day, or maybe that was kind of considered to be a mandatory program, you can say, for opening up the young minds, and it was like kind of a teaching process. So the more you travel, the more you learn, the more you pick up, the more you become well versed in the ways of life. So he too very extensively traveled across Europe, especially he traveled in Italy, where he lived for almost 7 years in the beautiful cities of Venice and Pisa. It was in Italy that he was often visited by his friend and fellow poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. Last time we've just recently finished Shelley's poem, and these two were very good friends, and they formed a part of inner circle, you can say, and where they frequently met, they discussed politics, they discussed literature, and they wrote poetry. It was later in life that Byron joined the Greek War of Independence, and which was fighting the Ottoman Empire. And it was during this time only that he contracted some disease. And while he was leading a campaign during the war, he caught some kind of fever, and he died very early at the age of 36 in 1824. So you can see that most of these poets, they died young. They did not flower, or you can say they did not reach maturation. They did not, die as old poets with a lot of experience, but rather they died young. But interestingly, even in their youth, even in their young age, they indulged, or you can say they were adventurous, and they experienced a lot within a short span of time. And for his contribution during this Greek war, the Greeks almost revered him as a national hero. As far as Byron's education is concerned, he received his formal education from Harrow and Trinity College, Cambridge. And because he was born with a deformed foot, he was given to violent bouts of temper. Also, he lost his father at a very early age. As a result, his mother overindulged him, because he had lost his father, he had a clubbed foot. So, naturally, usually it is seen that parents, or especially mothers, have a soft corner for children who have some kind of a, physical problem or a deformity. And on top of it, he lost his father at a very young age. So as a result, his life as a student and early years were marked by decadence. He was renowned as the gloomy egoist of his autobiographical poem Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, which was written between the period of 1812 and 1818. And he is now generally esteemed for the satiric realism of Don Juan, which was written after Childe Harold, that is between the period of 1819 and 1824. But there is no denying the fact that he was a poet and satirist whose poetry and flamboyant personality captured the imagination of the people of Europe. And being a contemporary of Keats and Shelley, Byron's writings are somewhat like theirs. His poetry too is patently autobiographical. It's very self-revealing, and maybe it is more self-revealing than the poetry of Keats and Shelley. And upon close examination, you can see the paradox of his complex character, which resolved into certain elements. And early on, Byron became aware of, reality's imperfections. That real life is never perfect. It has its drawbacks, it has its flaws, it has its issues and troubles and turbulations. But the skepticism and cynicism bred of his disillusionment coexisted with a lifelong propensity to seek ideal perfection in all of life's experiences. I think this is one characteristic of most romantic poets. Shelley too was looking for a utopian world. He was also looking for certain, perfection in the social, in the political setup. And here too, Byron always was kind of seeking an ideal perfection, and he felt that life's experiences could be just perfect. And as a result of this expectation, as a result of this wish, he often swung between deep-seated melancholy and humorous mockery in his reaction to the disparity that existed between real life and his unattainable ideals. Somehow, the ideals, the objectives, they remain unreachable, something you cannot achieve. They are just like kind of just out of reach. So, the melancholy of Childe Harold and the satiric realism of Don Juan are, you can say, two sides of the same coin. I mean, they are two, they may be very opposite or they may be extremes, but at the same time, they are sides of the same coin. Because while the first poem is an example of the moods of the romantic despair in reaction to the life's ups and downs, topsy-turvy turbulations, the second poem, on the other hand, highlights the humorous irony attending the unmasking of the hypocritical facade of reality. So it's like, on one hand, there is an expectation of perfection, but unable, that just out of reach kind of a feeling. And on the other hand, when you cannot attain something, you, kind of open up the face of reality. You kind of open it up and you kind of unravel it, or you kind of make it visible thread by thread, you lay bare the reality. Initially, Byron was diverted from his satiric, realistic bent by the success of Childe Harold, because Childe Harold had attained a lot of success when it was written and published. And as a result, he tried his hand with the Oriental tales reflecting a rather gloomy mood of disenchantment and self analysis. But later, when he moved to Italy, I mean, he had left his home, he had left England and he moved to Italy permanently, then he never returned. The relaxed and freer life there that he experienced gradually led him to write in a satiric vein. And he found his expertise in the mock heroic style of the Italian verse satire. Byron also wrote plays, but these plays were not very highly regarded. It was his poetry that gained a lot of recognition, but not his plays. He provided Manfred, Cain, and other historical dramas with characters whose exalted rhetoric is replete with Byronic philosophy and self confession, because Byron's writings reveal a lot about himself, and at particular point of time he felt a little hesitant about sharing so much of himself with the public. But it is to be noted that these plays are truly successful only insofar as their protagonists reflect Byron's own personality. So we can say that the plays are a true representation of the Byronic hero, or you can say Byron himself. It is interesting to note that Byron was a superb letter writer and he was very witty. And in the 20th century, publication of many of his previously unknown letters has further enhanced his literary reputation. And whether dealing with love or poetry, he cuts through to the heart of the matter with the admirable, you can say, incisiveness, very precisely. And his apt and amusing turns of phrase make even his business letters fascinating. Now, this aspect itself is pretty fascinating, that somebody can write business letters also in such a style that they catch the imagination of the public, that they become so popular. So, Byron showed only that facet of his many sided nature that was most congenial to each of his friends. Uh, this happens with most of us, that with different people we are different. There is a certain kind of an equation that you uh, have with certain people, and it may not be the same with maybe your family members or maybe your junior colleagues. So while to some he was a waggish and a humorous companion, cynical and realistic at one point of time, to others, especially his women friends, he could be tender, melancholy, idealistic. But this weakness was also Byron's strength. This chameleon like characteristic, where he could change. So his character was marked not by hypocrisy but by sympathy and adaptability. He was, you couldn't call him a hypocrite, because he was true. He was true in whatever interaction, whatever relationship he had with different people. He was true to his own being. So you can say that he was a kind of an adaptable kind of a person. With different people, he could adapt perfectly. The side that he showed at a given time was a real, if only partial, revelation of his true self, because it was not that he, shared everything or shared completely or, very openly at any given point of time. And his mobility of character permitted him to savor and to record the mood and thought of the moment with a sensitivity that was denied to those who were tied to the conventions of consistency. This is a very interesting line, because if you try to remain very faithful or if you try to remain very consistent, then maybe consistent to a certain way of being, then maybe you're not being true to yourself, because each human being is changeable, is not always constant. There are different moods, there are different feelings, there are different emotions at different points of time. And I think Byron had that capacity to go along with the flow of whatever he was experiencing. So that way, he was a more true person. There was a more true representation of himself in all his works than other poets or other writers. And Byron exercised a marked influence on continental literature and art, and his reputation as a poet is higher in many European countries than in Britain or America. And like in the continental area, he was more popular, and his writings also inspired many composers. Now, this is something really commendable, because over 40 operas have been based on his works, which is quite massive. And in addition to 3 operas which are specifically only about Byron himself. So you can see that he had a very strong influence on people. Then the figure of Byron's hero pervades most of his work, and Byron himself is considered to epitomize many of the characteristics of this literary figure. The Byronic hero is very popular, is somebody who has left a lot of impact on literature. And the use of the Byronic hero by many authors and artists of the Romantic movement show Byron's influence during the 19th century and beyond. Because up till now, you can see his influence is there. He's being read, he's being discussed, his works are part of our curriculum. So a lot of people were influenced by him, a lot of authors were influenced by him and his Byronic hero. And not to forget the famous Bronte sisters. They were also influenced by him. And his philosophy was more durable and influential in continental Europe than in England. And the famous German philosopher and the cultural critic, composer, and poet, whose name he is very well known and very, very popular, that is Friedrich Nietzsche. He admired him. And the Byronic hero was echoed in Nietzsche's Superman, which is a concept of the beyond man, or you can say the Uberman or superhuman, which humanity should set as a goal for itself. That is what Nietzsche felt. He felt that this Byronic hero is somebody that should be, the target of the mankind, to have that ideal person, to be that ideal person. Then there are so many things that the Byronic hero represents. I'll just quickly outline what the Byronic hero is all about. The Byronic hero presents an idealized but flawed character whose attributes include a wide wide variety of markers, which include great talent, great passion, a distaste for society and social institutions, a lack of respect for rank and privilege, although possessing both, being thwarted in love by social constraint or death, then rebellion, exile, an unsavory secret past. Byron also had an unsavory secret past. He had to face a lot of controversies because he had bisexual inclinations. Then the Byronic hero is marked by arrogance, by overconfidence, or you can say a lack of foresight, and ultimately a self-destructive manner. Now, all these characteristics up to a certain point are very much there in Byron himself. And these types of characters have since then become very pertinent, very popular, both in literature and politics. So we can see that the kind of extent that Byron had over literature, over our writings, over different authors, uh, which, have led to his popularity and which have led to his being read even now, till date. He keeps on influencing us, he keeps on influencing literature. So, this was a very short, brief introduction to Byron, and it just kind of gives us where he belonged, how he developed his way of writing, how he was influenced, what kind of inclinations he had, what kind of influence he had in turn on other people, on other writers, on literature, where his popularity lay, and how we are, you know, under his spell even today. So, this is it for now. In the next lecture, I'll give you an introduction to the poem that we have as part of our syllabus, that is, There is a Pleasure in the Pathless Woods. So, I'll end here today. Thank you once again for your patient listening. Bye bye.